Sup Internet, Raggedy Adams here. And today's a sad day for me because due to recent events, I now have to put out another open letter. I will be posting this on my Facebook, on my Tumblr. My editor at Chud has agreed to run it on their website as well. I'm not happy that I've had to do this, but it's got to be done. An open letter to DC Comics from Adam X. Smith. Whilst I do not wish to drag my contribution to Thor's comic column into editorializing any more than I already have, I feel that I have to say something, however brief, about the recent debacle at DC concerning the revelation of J.H. Williams III and W. Hayden Blackman's resignation from Batwoman, and the unfolding drama of the Harley Quinn Sexy Suicide talent contest. The official statement from DC in response to the Batwoman fiasco has been to distance themselves from any anti-LGBT bias firstly, and then to explain that their decision was based on the notion currently held by the company that they do not wish for Kate Kane, aka Batwoman, to marry her fiancée, Maggie Sawyer, because none of their characters are allowed to be happy. Flimsy as this excuse is, and even if we ignore the fact that the decision for the two to marry was planned months in advance to little controversy from DC, and was, like several other story arcs, spiked at the last minute, it hardly accounts for the decision that Superman and Wonder Woman, two of the company's flagship characters, becoming an item, is somehow an event worthy of pomp and publicity, whilst Batwoman, whose popularity is the result of genuine fan interest and hard-won struggles by creative teams, has had her entire run at DC compromised by editorial interference to such a degree that it has resulted in not only Williams and Blackman quitting the book, but in co-creator Greg Rucka being permanently estranged from the company and the original artist on the title leaving before the book had even been released due to creative differences. Nor does it explain or justify the abrupt shift in the characterization of Harley Quinn, from a childlike, cartoonish female sidekick to the Joker, whose sexuality, when present, was always implicit and naive, to a heavily sexualized, frequently victimized damsel stereotype, defined through her relationships to men. And it certainly doesn't explain the recent talent contest's unhealthy decision to fetishize her as a self-harming masochist and a figure of mocking derision. DC has remained largely silent on that front, perhaps in the knowledge that there is no way of spinning this particular faux pas in their favour, perhaps also in the knowledge that Harley is not the only female character being disproportionately mangled and mishandled by them. Last week on the column, reviewing the exceptional Batman Black and White #1, I said that I would happily settle for a retread of the 1990s Bruce Timm iteration of Harley Quinn with all the good and bad that would entail, then accept whatever DC was currently passing off as Harley Quinn comics, with the continuing noxious trend of demeaning sexual and physical exploitation of the character in the name of so-called fan service. The week before that, reviewing the mediocre by comparison Batman Incorporated special, I said that we the public don't want or need to keep redefining Batman, or copy-pasting him across the world in the form of international XPs. We just need better Batman comics, full stop. I will reinforce and re-articulate that statement now. We not only need better Batman comics, before that, we need a better DC comics. One that respects the desires of the creators they pay to write and illustrate stories for them, that doesn't ambush them with editorial bullshit at the tail end of the publication pipeline, but works with them throughout to ensure we get the entertainment we deserve, and most importantly, one that answers for its failures to meet the standard we as consumers should all hold them to. Since the 1950s and the days of Mort Weisinger, DC has had a habit of employing fetishistically strict, almost dictatorial publishing and editorial heads, bent on enforcing a house style often at odds with the wishes of loyal readers and long-suffering contributors. Williams and Blackman don't name names in their joint letters of resignation, but I will say this much. Until the situation at DC improves, and some kind of statement accounting for the current stagnation and degradation of the DC brand is made, I, Adam X. Smith, will not read, nor purchase, nor review anything on which Dan Didio, current co-publisher of DC, carries a byline of any kind, whether as writer, editor, or publisher. This I will commit to for the period of 12 months, effective as of midnight September 13th, 2013 until midnight September 12th, 2014, and on pain of forfeit. Some will say singling Mr. Didio out for blame is unfair, but I disagree. As a publisher, he is responsible for what the company publishes first and foremost, and it is therefore in his interest to treat comments made in the press about the quality of DC's output seriously. His reputation as a middle manager and a bully to those he dislikes precedes him from his days as VP Executive Editor in the mid-2000s, and as the co-publisher with Jim Lee, he must be made to see that the ship is sinking, and that he can either steer it away from the rocks, or we will have to go down with it. If the problem is coming from the top, then that is where the solution must come from. I am aware that this decision is going to limit my ability to review comics, and I regret that it will most likely prevent me from reading comics I would otherwise enjoy. It breaks my heart that I'm even considering this. I love DC, and want them to succeed and remain relevant. But in a relationship that is unhealthy, there are only two options to redress the imbalance: protest or leave. I'm choosing both. Good publicity is what drives companies like DC, and I cannot in good conscience give them that, under the current editorial stance, that their characters are not allowed to be happy in pursuit of some adolescent idea of grittiness, that their contractors may be harangued with impunity, and that the creations that they are the stewards of are run into the ground through greed and carelessness. As a fan, as a lover of comics of all kinds, as a boy who has loved Batman and Robin, Superman and Superboy, the Joker and Harley Quinn, John Constantine and Swamp Thing, Spider Jerusalem and Jesse Custer, Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters, and so many others in between, I ask for one thing and one thing only. DC Comics, Mr. Jim Lee, Mr. Dan Didio, Mr. Jeff Johns, Ms. Diane Nelson, Mr. Bob Harris, I implore you all, be the DC Comics I fell in love with, the one we love and deserve. DC Comics, please, sort your fucking act out. Sincerely, Adam X. Smith.